Today on CityCast Portland, we're talking about a supposed controversial psilocybin service center, the status of the county's drug treatment deflection center, and the change of heart Multnomah County Sheriff Morrisey O'Donnell had concerning our city's camping ban. Joining me on this week's Friday News Roundup are our very own executive producer, John Notarianni, and KBOO News Director, Althea Billings. It's Friday, August 23rd. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Welcome, everyone, to the Friday News Roundup. Althea, John, thank you so much for hanging out with me this morning.
Hey.
For all of our new listeners, today is the day we break down some of the biggest local stories of the week with some of the best and brightest journalists in town. But before we jump into the news, I usually ask an opening question so our listeners get to know our guests a little better. But I'm just we're going to move a little bit just for a sec, just a little stall on that, because John, we have a correction.
What's up?
So this email came in early today, and the title already, gold. It said, "So now I'm just disappointed," which I already was like, oh, I'm in. So a listener wrote in and wrote, "On Tuesday, both Claudia and her guest referred to District 4 as Northwest Portland and Selwood. I, too, am in District 4, which includes South and Southwest Portland. It's like fire sign theater. They never come up in the hills. We have restaurants, pot shops, dive bars, and parks. Rant over. I will continue to pay you. Mostly you do okay. Mostly." Subscriber Chris.
We're sorry. And we should be on that because Claudia, you and I both used to work at OPB, which is in South Portland.
I know.
We spent a lot of time down there.
What was that place we would always go to? It was our happy hour after, it was Buffalo something?
Buffalo Gap Saloon, super solid bar.
Chris, we'll meet you at Buffalo Gap Saloon. We will apologize. We know that your area exists. He also signed off Multnomah, so we would remember again.
Also the Circuit, bouldering gym, super underappreciated, cool spot. Yeah, there's lots of great stuff over there.
Lots of, I love that it's a 1 block area from OPB, by the way.
It's where you can get on your lunch break. Yeah.
This is Southwest.
Apologies, Chris. Apologies, all of South and Southwest Portland. We know that you exist. Anyhow, back to our opening question. Today's is connected to the DNC roll call. I don't know if you guys got a chance to check that out. If you don't follow these things, the Democratic National Convention, which took place in Chicago and ended on Thursday, did something totally new this year during their ceremonial roll call. Did you guys watch it at all? Because this is the first time I've ever even watched the DNC.
Yeah. They started having fun this year.
Earlier this week, I was like, I do not care about the DNC. I am not watching. And I totally got sucked in. Yeah.
Roll call, if you don't know, if you're like John, Althea, and I, you don't watch. It's the part of the convention that they go state to state in alphabetical order and declare how many delegates they're pledging their votes to the Democratic presidential nominee, which is Kamala Harris. But honestly, it is kind of boring. The Republican National Convention also does it, so it's nothing special, you know?
Same states.
Same states. But this year, the Democrats were really feeling themselves because they got a freaking DJ and every state got a personalized musical intro and shit got live. Some highlights include Little John coming out of nowhere, not even where the state was positioned, and just blasting Turn Down for What to introduce Georgia, which segued to Get Low as he incorporated Tim Walz' name into the lyrics, from the windows to the walls. And if you know the lyrics to Get Low, you know the line that follows is absolutely filthy. So that was just the vibe, just to rock a celebration.
I saw some clips of it. Everybody's having fun. I went through the whole list of what songs every state chose, and 2, what the relationship was. And it makes me feel bad for states like the Dakotas that they came up with nothing.
So what Althea is saying is that the musical intros were basically bands from that state or musicians of national bands that you know of that were born in that state and you may not know, Florida, play Tom Petty. You know, Missouri lucked the fuck out this year. They played Chapel Roan because they were just like, I don't know what we would have done. You know, Idaho felt so bad. They played my own private Idaho from the B-52s. You know what I mean? Like loose connection.
Yeah.
So this leads me to our opening question. I think this is how it's going to be from now on, you guys. I think the DNC roll calls are now going to be these crazy dance parties, but it means that Oregon is going to need to start thinking of good intro songs because we did just fine. We did just fine this year with Float On by Modest Mouse. Great intro, because that's a thing. The song itself needs a majestic intro. You know, like when California came out and you heard the next episode, holy shit. You know, like, na. Like that was, I cried a little. But like, we need to get some songs together for the next years or so. So wondering what your idea is for Oregon's next roll call songs.
Oh, I'm so on this. I think the next roll call is going to be I Can't Wait by New Shoes.
Ooh.
You remember New Shoes?
Yeah.
The like 80s sort of synth band? It's like, bum 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 bum. I mean, it's like a great like walk-on song, like from Oregon. Bum 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 bum. Yeah.
Althea, they're from Portland, if you didn't know. Portland issues.
I figured as much. God, I can read context clues. Jeez.
If you can't think of Oregon, I know you're from Washington. You could think of Washington because I'm sorry, Macklemore. I'm sorry, that was a ball that was dropped. Washington has like everyone.
I mean, to pull Macklemore and not Jimi Hendrix or any of the grunge movement feels a little. But I mean, here's the thing.
Jimi Hendrix, man. Okay, sorry,
Seattle at least does claim Macklemore, to be clear.
Yeah, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, let's go Jimi Hendrix. And now that it's a thing, you have to build up the roster. Also, an opportunity for artists trying to make it big.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. So my suggestion for the next Oregon song is that we should actually get Amine to just start writing one, because like
so true.
I wondered like why the heck we didn't use one of his songs, and I realized he hasn't written one yet. That like Ron Wyden can talk about voting rights on top of like like every one of his songs. I'm just like, no, not that part.
Well, I mean, Caroline was really big. I feel like people would recognize it.
Bad bitch.
Oh,
here comes Oregon.
Well, they didn't play the lyrics. Well, some of them they just played the instrumental.
No, for sure. But you know what I mean. He needs an anthem.
Red Mercedes.
Okay.
Damn, I love that song.
Anyhow, you know what, Althea? This is why I said you should pick the Washington one.
I'm sorry. Don't go deep in the Amine discography. I got it.
All right. Well, thanks you guys for your suggestions. On to the news of the week. Althea, what are you looking at?
Yeah, the cover story from the Willamette Week this week is all about this new sort of take on Oregon psilocybin legalization and this company called The Sacred Mushroom that's opening in Old Town Portland. When psilocybin was passed in Oregon, it was very much about therapy and easing people's suffering, and that there's emerging studies out there showing that it can really do wonders for PTSD and depression and anxiety and stuff like that. The Sacred Mushroom is maybe trying to attract a little bit more of a fun clientele than that. Not to say that people aren't fun, but, you know, if you wanted to perhaps do mushrooms, not specifically about, you know, a treatment-resistant depression that you have, there's a deep dive into them, their company, and sort of like the layers on top of the company. Like so many of the ones that have opened in Oregon so far are very much like mom and pop shops, like, you know, therapists who believe in this stuff, who've gotten certified, trying to make it happen. But there's a lot of layers to this, a lot of history with potential fraud, which is cool.
Yeah, that's crazy.
The SEC is involved with some of these people.
Yeah, but I just do want to say, Althea, when I read the headline of this story, I thought it was going to be a lot more fun.
Yeah.
And fanciful. And I was like, tripping. Yeah. And I was just like, oh no. Yeah. So please, Althea. Oh no, everyone listening.
Yeah. Reading it, it was like, there's more? There's still more? Oh my God.
It keeps going. The photos and like the vibe of their space, I would say it's very hipster, but chill as in terms of the vibe, as opposed to hippie or clinical. So that's kind of what they're going for. The owner is this guy, Brian Arnold, who's lived in Oregon for 20 years. Did mushrooms, likes it. That's the good criteria to start learning to be, you know, the psilocybin therapy provider or whatever. There's a big stake in the Sacred Mushroom that is held by this company called Kaya Holdings, which was a biofuel company turned cannabis turned psilocybin company that's owned by this guy, Craig Frank, who, while we don't know if he's done any fraud, there's a lot of conversations about this being a penny stock company. And they're kind of bragging about the fact that they are one of the only publicly traded psilocybin companies. And there's a few different sources in this article saying, hey, be careful with that. There's a lot of reasons to be skeptical. Interesting about Kaya Holdings, they did get in trouble with the OLCC for selling pre-rolls that had broken glass in them, allegedly. Allegedly, they did not. They settled without admitting fault or anything, and this was at their dispensary in Salem.
I just want to know, did they put the broken glass in there? Like, I don't understand. Does weed come with broken glass? Like, how do you do that?
Worst drug dealer ever.
I guess I assumed in reading it that it's like when a bartender or somebody breaks glass in the ice, and you're like, God, we have to change the ice. You know, somebody broke glass in the weed, but like you wouldn't be able to pick it out. I think you could sift for that kind of thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Right,
I don't know how they're mass producing.
Thank you, Althea, for making it possible.
Yeah,
my
you're
imagination.
welcome.
Go on.
So there's this Craig Frank guy who started a biofuel company, but then pivoted to doing cannabis. And during the green wave, they call it, of when cannabis first got legalized in Oregon, there was definitely this like boom of people trying to invest in it, and some larger investors made off with a good amount of smaller investors' money, we can say. And there's a third figure involved in the sacred mushroom, which again is this hipstery come do shrooms in like with a weighted blanket on top of you kind of thing. Mm-hmm. This guy called W. David Jones, who's an advisor paid by Kaya, big money, who was convicted of securities fraud in the 80s for trying a scheme promoting gold mines in Nevada and California, which is wild.
His name even sounds like an old school railroad gold baron name.
Yeah. And he got into more trouble in 2002, but then he flipped for the feds with a whole bust of, I guess, all of Boca Raton, which I didn't even know it was going down like that in Boca Raton.
A fraud and a snitch? Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, but he got cleared by the OHA and their background checkers. They cleared the criminal background check. Everybody that's involved with them, I mean, they're getting asked about it, but they're like, no, he paid his dues. He did his time. Definitely not doing fraud in the burgeoning psilocybin market. It's quite an interesting yarn that they've been pulling over at the sacred mushroom, I guess.
I feel like there's so much to like pick at here. And when I read this, like the one thing that I just couldn't get over is like, okay, this is all coming through Measure 109, which allowed for sort of controlled therapeutic use of mushrooms, psilocybin in Oregon. And they're talking about how they want it to be fun and have like Super Bowl parties, which like watching the Super Bowl on like a high dose of mushrooms sounds horrendous. Like, can you imagine trying to keep track of what's going on at a football game, tripping on mushrooms?
I already can't tell sober, by the way.
But I was just like, they can't do that, can they? They can't just be like, it's for fun. They can't do that. So I went deep on Chapter 475A, the like 25,000 word law that sort of governs how all of this happens. And admittedly, I didn't read it word for word as 25,000 words, but like I didn't see anything in there that like specifically lays out that this needs to be for therapeutic use. So like, is this just a loophole? Am I missing something? It just seems really weird.
Yeah, what's crazy about this company is that, as John said, they're trying to make it fun. But what really stuck out is when they said company retreats. Could you imagine getting super like high on mushrooms with your boss? That already, I'm like, this should be illegal. We need to shut this down. Do you know what I mean? And I think the reason why they were like, hey, this writer was just giving all the things like, oh yeah, on Halloween, they're going to have a Halloween trip, is just because like, hey, not only are all these things not what we thought this was intended for, but also this whole thing might be a scam.
Yeah.
Like they're selling penny stocks. If you guys don't know what penny stocks are, if you're like, what the heck are we talking about? It means that people sell stocks to companies that like they're clearly not going to survive. And so they're hoping that everybody, little investors buy shares of this company. And then, of course, they know this company's going to go down. So then they just leave with all that money. And what they do is like the big alarm that goes is when these companies start promoting their stock. And so this company, Sacred Mushrooms, started doing that. And everyone's like, wait, hold on. And then they looked at their roster and they're just like, oh, these fraudsters and shucksters, like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Glass and weed people, like, what's going on? So I think that's the
gold
big
mines?
alarm.
Literal gold mines, not figurative. This is a gold mine, literal gold mine.
Yeah. So I think that's the alarm that people are raising here.
I mean, one of the things that stuck out to me, I guess, is this component of it that is the whole industry right now is on extremely tight margins, mostly because of the, stringent restrictions that the state has in place for these types of businesses, which, makes sense in the sense that you don't want the feds to come after you because psilocybin is technically still a Schedule I drug. And Oregon's on the forefront of this kind of thing. And again, similar to cannabis, that there's a lot of like lockdown regulations when you're the first one to do it so the feds don't come after you. I get that. But it makes it ripe for kind of fraud or, being able to sell this pitch. I mean, even thinking about penny stocks and the press releases that they're putting out, now they can actually say to people, like, do you believe in psilocybin therapy? Do you believe in this? Like, invest in our company. We're going to make that happen. And it just feels a little weird. It feels a little weird. And a whole bunch of, regular old mom and pop places have already closed because the margins are so thin.
I just want to do a quick shout out. In my parsing of the legalese, I noticed 475A.507 in the legal code, which is the prohibition against giving psilocybin product as a prize. Which means, Claudia, our plan to give away free magic mushrooms to CityCast members is now officially debunked. We can't do it.
Oh, sorry, Chris in Southwest Portland. We're going to have to take that package apart. I'm sorry. That was our sorry gift, but I guess we'll figure something else out. Okay. Well, let's take a quick break here. And when we return, more headlines of the week. This year's Calvin and Mayho Tanabe Address, which is the annual lecture the OHSU Foundation puts on that brings thought-provoking speakers to Portland, is featuring a non-human keynote speaker for the first time in its nearly 10-year history. They're actually hosting Sophia the Robot, an AI-powered humanoid who has spoken at the UN and is the first machine to receive citizenship. Sophia has captured the imaginations of global audiences since her debut at South by Southwest 8 years ago. Her interactive talk takes place on Wednesday, November 13th at the Newmark Theater. It's all about the awe-inspiring potential of AI and robotics to advance healthcare and life sciences. So go grab your tickets today at ohsufoundation.org/Tanabe. That's TANABE. Before we go into the headline that I want to dive into, John, I know you have something to share. What's going on?
Yeah, so like I said, we cannot give mushrooms to our listeners. I'm sorry. But we do have a new perk coming out for members of CityCast Portland starting next week. On Monday, our newsletter, Hey Portland, sort of the companion to the podcast, we're going to be sending out a weekly roundup of all of the best events going on in Portland each week. We're all sort of working together to comb through and compile these. Every Monday morning, members are going to get this list in their inbox of just the best things to do in the city. It's the newest member-exclusive perk, along with things like ad-free listening that people who are members get when they listen to our podcast. And it's also just, membership helps support what we do. So thank you so much to everyone who's already a member. And if you're interested, you can find out more and you can join up. Membership.citycast.fm.
Yeah, shout out to Rachel, too, who puts that stuff together. All right, well, this week I'm looking at why Multnomah County has stalled opening its Deflection Center. I read reporting by OPB, COIN, and KGW. For background, starting September 1st, the rollbacks of Measure 110 are going into effect, meaning drug possession will once more become a misdemeanor crime. The Deflection Center is where police were supposed to take people arrested for drug possession to access treatment, because that's a big part of that new law. It's considered a deflection from actually going to jail, hence the unfortunate name. Fortunately, the actual name I found out of the building is going to be Coordinated Care Pathway Center, so it won't be as Orwellian. Because I did think it was going to just, you're going to go in and it's going to be like Brazil. You know what I mean? Like that movie. It's just going to say Deflection Center. Okay, anyhow, one of my first actual questions was then, well, like, does that mean that the law will go into effect and it will also be halted since these deflection centers and drug treatments are, supposed to be the option instead of incarceration? And the answer is no. Drug possession laws will change as scheduled on September 1st. And until a deflection center opens, the county plans to use mobile outreach to offer treatment options. In a press release, county health officials said that they would deploy behavioral health providers and professional peer specialists to respond to law enforcement in the field. And that's where they'll conduct referrals, arrange and connect eligible persons to services. So they're like, no, we're still going to do that. And if you're worried about lack of staff, which I was, because that's one of the reasons they said they're not going to open on time, is they're like, we don't have enough staff. And I'm like, well, then how are you going to have enough staff for these mobile? How are you going to deliver? You know what I mean? Anyhow, they said that also aiding in that mobile outreach effort will be the contractor that the county hired to run the deflection center. And I did a little digging because I was like, wait, because I hadn't heard about this. The contractor partner is a nonprofit out of Baltimore called the Turek House. So the Turek House opened a drug and alcohol addiction facility in Baltimore way back in 1970. So they have this long history running this type of health system. Their site claims that they serve nearly 300 patients a day out of their Baltimore facility. And they're doing everything from inpatient detox, residential treatment to behavioral services. So they appear to know what they're doing, and hopefully they're helping guide that mobile outreach response. But before I go any further, what do you guys think?
I mean, to me, I remember when this plan came online and my take was like, that sounds great. There's no way that they're going to get this done in that time. There's no way that we're going to be able to put this system together in like the time that they allotted, and clearly that's the case. They just didn't have enough time to get this whole thing up and running. And one of the articles I read about it, County Chair Jessica Vega Peterson said that one nurse had been hired. An offer had gone out to a second candidate last week, and that the center can operate with a minimum of 2 nurses, which to me sounds like the worst staffed Dairy Queen ever. It's like that is not sustainable.
Blizzard's ending up on the floor at that point.
Yeah, if you can't run a Dairy Queen on 2 people, you can't run this intake center on 2 people. Like, what the fudge? Yeah, no. So the new plan is that they're going to open mid to late October. And honestly, I'm still just like, you need more time. Yeah, just to add to what you said, Multnomah County Chair Jessica Vega Peterson, or as we know her in these parts, JVP, basically said, hey, we stalled because we don't have enough staff. But this is what I also learned, is that they're not able to get into the building. The building is still getting constructed until August 28th.
Yeah.
So that's how much time does that give them? And I was like, okay, but you can't just throw Dairy Queen workers into the Dairy Queen. You have to show them how to use the machines. Do you know what I'm saying?
It's not easy to dip that code. You got to have some practice.
There's an art.
There's a flick of the wrist. And what I'm saying is that like they're just going to shove all of their 2 or 3 nurses into this brand new building, and they're just supposed to figure it out, like set up not only protocol for how they're going to work with the police when they come in, so intake, but also just security. Like, how are we not going to, get hurt doing our job? So yeah, they're going to need some time to figure that out.
Part of what this takes me back to when this was passed in the legislature late winter, early spring. These deflection centers are not required by the state. Many counties don't have them at all. And there's part of me, I mean, it's a quick turnaround regardless, but part of me wonders, well, if you were required to do it, would you have that sort of thing? That this isn't even something that the state mandates that they have to do. So with all the other projects at the county that are going in varying degrees of well, I just wonder if something like this gets backburnered, because they're not going to get any kind of teeth from, the state government or anything for not having it.
Well, I was confused because my understanding is that, Multnomah County isn't the only county that's doing this, because these things are being funded through a $20 million state grant. So what I'm saying is like there is funding for it, and I thought it was part of the law. Like they can't just go straight to jail. So I'm sorry, I'm confused. John, do you know what I'm
Yes,
do you have answers for me, please?
I do. So
Okay.
when I was poking around, I found this great KGW article looking at what's going on in Washington County. And, the thrust of it is basically like, Washington County's totally on track to be ready for September 1st.
Oh, wow.
Their whole idea is just to do mobile outreach from the get-go. Like they were just sort of like, yeah, we have like a very comprehensive of how we're going to do mobile outreach. We have these like partners and like plans in place to do that. And the thing that like was most amazing to me in this story, they talked to Washington County District Attorney Kevin Barton, who basically says, yeah, we do intend to still have a single hub like Multnomah County is working on. The idea has been in development since 2019.
Wow.
So we're hoping within the next year it will come online. They've been working on it for 5 years and still haven't opened it yet. So like Multnomah County being like, yeah, we can knock it out in a couple months. Like, of course that's not going to happen.
What's wrong with us?
I mean,
we're just like these overachievers who don't understand deadlines and like real life. What's wrong with us?
I mean, this is like, with it being a 5-year process, makes a ton of sense because this is all sort of in the conversation of the severe lack of resources that Oregon even has for drug rehabilitation and treatment. And that's what Measure 110, like the Burns, the behavioral health resource networks we're trying to build, is this like long-term, like different types of care. And one of the things that jumped out to me about this deflection center, which we're not going to have on time, so don't even worry about if you need to go to the deflection center, is they're supposed to connect people to treatment if they're willing to at that particular point. The question I have is people who want treatment can't get it already. People are waiting outside, trying to get into recovery services, trying to get into opioid withdrawal, trying to get into sobering beds. And we don't have enough of that for people who already say they want it, let alone people who have been found to be smoking on the street or whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't even know how is that going to work?
Oh, But here's the deal. So OPB's article detailed more of the deflection program our county created because, like I said, every county creates their own. So in Multnomah County, only people possessing a small amount of drugs would be eligible for deflection. To enter the program, a person cannot have committed other crimes in the previous 30 days or have failed a previous deflection attempt in that window. And the center wouldn't be open 24 hours or have sobering beds available until the second phase rolled out in 2025. So a county official also told OPB that people using drugs may not be able to go to the facility if they have urgent medical or behavioral health needs. So I get why, but at the same time, I'm like, well, then what's the rush if you're not even going to like do the thing?
Yeah.
Just to go mobile until you get this thing sorted out, you know?
Yeah. And it bears repeating. This was exactly the problem with Measure 110.
Yeah.
That we decriminalized drugs and did not have time to get the infrastructure to support those changes in place, which is why we are implementing this law too. It is just the same thing again.
You would think that the county would have been like, you know what? We're going to learn from our mistakes. I did want to say that another thing that I found interesting in the county's press release is that they also mentioned that the pausing to the opening could provide more opportunities for community engagement around the facility because the Buckman neighborhood was told nothing. And they just were like, surprise, deflection center. And it's like less than 2 blocks away from a preschool, which earlier this month threatened to sue the county. And they're just like, hey, if you do not figure out security protocols for like 2 blocks around you, we're going to sue you. Because there's children here, and there's going to be people out of their minds coming to this deflection center, like figure something out. So that wasn't the other part. They're like, well, maybe we could do that now too. And I was like, maybe you should have done that before you announced the opening of this deflection center.
I mean, I know that area. That's where KBOO is located. I know the preschool. I know the building that they're talking about, which they were keeping under wraps, I think, to try to keep people from freaking out about it.
Oh my God.
But one of the things you mentioned about the requirements of who can even be admitted, that they is even eligible for this type of deflection. No crimes in the past 30 days, no previous deflection failure, which if they're not able to place somebody, does that count as a deflection failure? I'm not too sure about that. And also that they can't take anybody who is not at that very minute sober. If they're not sober, they're not allowed in there because we don't have the sobering beds ready.
Yeah.
So who is, I guess, using drugs on the street, who is sober, who can go to who is this actually going to serve? Maybe 2 nurses is enough because there's 3 people in the entire county that can't even be eligible to go in there, and they'll have the run of the place, and good for them. But it's not good. It doesn't seem like a good strat.
I've never seen Althea so worked up. She literally had her hand. Oh, she has her hand on her forehead, and she can't even look. Oh my God. It's not good. I feel like that is the pull quote for all of Friday Roundup.
So it's the podcast's new tagline.
CityCast Portland. It's not good. Let's rethink that one, John.
All right, we'll workshop it a little bit more.
Althea, thank you for putting yourself emotionally through this for us. Thank you for breaking this down. John, what is your headline?
I'm talking about a system that is potentially slightly less dysfunctional, but not significantly less. The big news that came out this week is that Multnomah County jails are now playing along with the city's recently imposed camping ban, mostly leaning on great reporting from OPB and the Oregonian on this. A quick catch-up of what's been going on with the camping ban in Portland. In case you missed it, there was a previous version that was blocked by a Multnomah County judge last year. The city passed a new one this year, began enforcing it towards the end of July, but just a couple days later, the sheriff of Multnomah County, Nicole Morrisey O'Donnell, basically refused to play along. They said that they did not want to use county jails to hold people before their court date, right? So there is this new ban. There are sort of legal ramifications in place, but the county was like, nah, we're not doing it. Well, this week, Morrisey O'Donnell has reversed course, announcing that the sheriff's office has an agreement to book people into the county jail on this violation. And they're sort of doing it as a trial period now for the next 120 days. And in a statement, they said that this is going to be a time to analyze the process to see if it's effective and sustainable. So after 400,000 false starts, it seems like this camping ban is going into effect fully. And there's also some changes that are going to be in effect where they're going to also sort of expand the deflection process, right? So now, once people are arrested, once they're booked, there will be an offer of shelter at the county jail. And the mayor said that they would be open to dismissing charges if somebody then accepts some sort of placement in a shelter at that point.
So like another step, because just to recap, basically, people are only going to be incarcerated if they are offered shelter and, there is available shelter and they're like, no. And so far, there's been one person that basically started this domino effect because one person went in and then the sheriff was like, we're not jailing this person for being homeless.
Yeah. In the meantime, police had issued 7 citations to violators of the rules because there was this weird month in between where they couldn't send them to jail, even though that's like what would normally happen. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about this about a couple weeks ago, and we speculated a lot as to why the county and the city were yet once again not on the same page. So I'm not going to rehash that, but I'm glad that this is happening. I'm not glad that people are having, to be forced to go to jail because they rather go to jail than like go to a shelter or whatever it is that they're offering them. That's not what I'm happy about. What I'm happy about is that our city and county are functional in a certain way and they're talking to each other and there's just a sliver of governance just happening, hooray for that.
I mean, I would speculate that it's because the county feels like they get jerked around by whatever the city wants to do. But
the thing is that there was a whole discussion. It's not like the county with the deflection center in Buckman. Like it wasn't like surprise. There's this stuff happening.
But like when you have a coworker that really tries to like run over what you're trying to do, and you're like, you didn't email me about that. I'm not going to that meeting. You didn't like. Sometimes you enforce boundaries that normally you could work beyond if the relationship is more strained. I mean, a couple of things this makes me think. One, they said that they would only consider actually jailing people who are, quote unquote, repeat offenders of living outside. So weird to call them a repeat offender. But thinking about how big is this population that we're talking about? And this is something that city councilors talk about all the time. They're like, there's these people and they don't want our help and they're service resistant. And Ted Wheeler and Dan Ryan, they'll get fired up about this. But if we're looking at like between 1 and 7 people who have even been cited for this, like how many, and are they repeat offenders? Like we don't necessarily have the data on that. But are these the specific people that this whole ordinance is written for? There are 6 people that the government wants to send to jail and can't, and they wrote a whole law about it. That's one of the things that it makes me think. The other thing that it reminds me of is how dangerous the county jail is, and that the county jail cannot keep people safe. 10 people died in custody in 2022 and 2023. They can't keep people sober either. They've talked about how they can't keep drugs out of the prison. And these are people who are, in there without a conviction as well. I mean, most people who are in jail as opposed to in prison. And a decent number were suicides last year. And there's also statistics out there that anytime somebody has contact with the carceral system, whether that's jail or prison or even cops, causes it's related to a severe spike in their likelihood to OD. So it's just really, really dangerous. I mean,
I see your concerns. Yeah.
Yeah. The sheriff herself said that the jail isn't going to solve the problem.
Yeah. I mean, and the entire conversation about this has been talking about sort of using jail as punishment. Because again, this is not people who are even really convicted of anything. They're being held, and the ordinance that they are violating is public camping. I'm still sort of hung up, though, on this trial period part of it, right? Where they say they're going to do it for 120 days, which one of the stories that I read pointed out, when does 120 days end? That ends in the middle of December. What happens on January 1st? We have a brand new city council and mayor taking over leadership in the city of Portland. So I can see how, on one hand, this is sort of creating a buffer for the sheriff's office and the mayor's office to sort of work out some of these details that potentially had been a roadblock before. But there is also sort of this potential of just kicking the can down the road and making this something that is going to be sorted out when we have a new city council, a new mayor, and, what else? A new district attorney as well.
Also, on top of it relates back to the Deflection Center with drugs being recriminalized. Do we think that the county jail is going to be able to handle prosecuting that kind of thing?
Exactly. Yeah.
I do want to say that
because they're not getting deflected.
Yeah, we all pointed this out. We were so smart. Months ago, we pointed all this just along with everyone in this freaking city and county. We were just y'all don't have the infrastructure for it now. How are you going to have it 6 months from now?
It's like your politician. I felt like you were at the DNC just then.
Thank you.
The cadence you adopted.
Except it was nothing positive coming out, nothing.
We need a theme song to end the podcast as well.
Yes, we cannot.
Yes, we cannot.
Let's do it later.
Or possibly never. Portland. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for hanging out with me. Althea, John, sorry we almost broke you today, Althea.
Happy to be here.
Appreciate y'all's time, and thank you, everyone, for listening. If you have an idea for a much more anthemic outro song, please send it over, portland@citycast.fm. That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thank you so much for listening. Our executive producer is John Notarianni. Our producers this week are Julia Fiaioni and Francisco Kilgore. Our Hey Portland newsletter editor is Rachel Monahan, and our host is me, Claudia Meza. Original music by Jenny Conley and Stephen Drizos. Additional music by Epidemic Sound and All the Kimonos. We'll be back Monday morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.